and welcome to the Polk Pioneers Oral History Program, a collaboration between the Polk County Historical Association, the Polk County History Center, and PGTV. I'm Murtis Young, Historic Preservation Manager at the History Center. Thank you for joining us today as I have the pleasure of interviewing Mrs. Jackie Conroy Summerlin, a longtime resident of the Davenport area. Mrs. Summerlin, thank you for joining me today. Let's begin your story with your birth and when you arrived in Polk County.
I was born in Orlando in November 26, 1942. It just happened to be Thanksgiving Day.
How exciting.
Yeah, I guess they thought so. And then we moved to Polk County when I was 7. Mm-hmm. At Christmas time, it was really exciting. And on the way here from Orange County, we came down 27, and one of my fondest memories are all of the orange trees. At 7, I noticed that. Mm-hmm. That made an impression on me because it was rolling hills, just orange grove after orange grove after orange grove until we got to Davenport.
Until you got to Davenport.
Yes.
Now that ties into your father, so let's talk a little bit about your parents. Your father's name is?
Andrew Jackson Conroy. He was born in Orlando. He grew up at Turkey Lake, and he married my mother, and we lived in Orange County as well. Mm-hmm. And when he was working for Minute Maid in Plymouth, and they came to Davenport to build a concentrate plant, mm-hmm. orange concentrate. So he came back and forth for a little while, and at Christmas time they took me out of school and we moved to Davenport. Davenport didn't have very many places to put people when they were, so we lived upstairs in Hiram Johnson's house, and we just thought it was marvelous, just marvelous. It had sidewalks, and I can remember the very first time I walked to the post office, and we met a man. His name was Mr. Jordan, and he said, "And what's your name?" And my mother told him that her name was Conroy. He said, "Good Irish name." And he was Irish too, I guess. Anyway, you could walk to the post office because everybody did. It was just 3 blocks.
Now let's talk about your mother. What is your mother's name?
My mother's name was Martha Strickland Conroy. Mm-hmm. She was from Alabama, and they moved to Apopka when she was probably 8 or 9. Her father had died at that point. Mm-hmm. And she had 6 brothers and sisters, and you know, there was no Social Security in those days, so everybody had to work together to make it work. Mm-hmm. So there you go. They all lived together.
Mm-hmm. And your parents met at what point?
In Apopka.
Okay.
And they were, well, my mother, when they got married, she was 21, and my dad was 20.
And he had a different skill. He did something different in Apopka. As I understand, he was a welder, had a shop.
No, he didn't have a shop. He worked for Minute Maid.
Okay.
In Apopka.
Okay.
But he was a welder.
Okay.
He worked at several places, but he ended up at Minute Maid. And then when he moved to Davenport, and they built the concentrate plant, and then Minute Maid pulled out and moved to Auburndale and built a concentrate plant there. But Daddy did not go. He stayed in Davenport and was in the maintenance department over it, I think. Mm-hmm. And there was some welding and things there, but that's how we ended up in Davenport.
So they decided to stay in Davenport, raised your family in Davenport, and you have some brothers and sisters. Tell us about
one brother.
One brother, okay. And what is his name?
His name is Buddy. his name is Albert, but nobody ever knew that. They didn't even call him Albert at school. They called him Buddy.
Buddy.
My granddaddy started that when he was very small.
And your granddaddy, tell us about your grandparents.
Okay. On my dad's side, my grandparents moved from Illinois, and when they came to Florida, they came 5 different modes of transportation.
Wow, okay, share that. What is that story?
Well, they came on a paddle boat.
Wow.
They came on a wagon. They came on horseback. They came, that's 3. A train.
Wow.
And there was another one, but I can't remember what that was. But it was quite an excursion from what I understand, and they camped a lot on the way, and it was a fun thing. And they homesteaded my granddaddy was about 8, so it was his grandparents that came. I mean, his parents that came.
Right.
And they homesteaded in Sorrento. And then my grandparents, when they got married, they homesteaded at Turkey Lake, which is out from Orlando. And that's where my dad, though they lived a little while in Orlando, but most of the time they were at Turkey Lake.
Turkey Lake. And for point of reference, our notes say they arrived around in the 1880s. Does that sound right? So the fun part, it sounds like you had such a wonderful, just exciting life as a child growing up in Davenport. So
oh, absolutely.
Just talk about that. Let's share some stories about life as a child growing up in Davenport.
Well, of course I went to school. Started in Christmas time, 2nd grade. And that was fun. School was fun. You know, you were with all your friends. But I think home was even funner, if that's a good word. Everybody lived, it wasn't like a subdivision today, but it was a neighborhood because Davenport was laid out to be a really pretty fancy place. We had sidewalks, we had curbs, we had drains, sewer drains, we had street lights in a little old town it didn't even have a stoplight when I moved there.
Wow.
And it had all this fancy stuff. It was supposed to be a really big town, but along came the bust, and that was the end of that. But in the meantime, that left all of these houses in Davenport with all of these young families and all of these little kids, and it was the most wonderful place in the whole world to grow up.
Delightful, isn't it, to be in that kind of environment?
It was super. We flew kites. We skated because we had wonderful, wonderful sidewalks. I had to take a broom with me when I skated because, you know, sand gets on the sidewalks and it gets in your ball bearings. And my daddy, when he took my skates apart to get the sand out of the ball bearings, did not say nice words. So I took a broom with me when I skated and brushed the sand away so I could go. But we flew kites, we built hideouts. It's a wonder we didn't kill ourselves digging a hole and hoping we didn't know the sand would fall in on you, but it's okay. We had an awful good time. But all the kids there were bunches of kids in the neighborhood.
One of the things I'm interested in, I remember a May Day celebration. What was that like in Davenport?
Okay,
What did you do?
That was a pretty big thing. It was down at the lake. We have one lake in Davenport, Lake Play, and before my time, someone had built these. It had gone on long before I ever came along, but they had these terraced. The lake was a sinkhole, I think, and so it went down, And so someone had come in and put bumps. So you sit on the bumps, put your feet down in the little trough, and there was a bump in front of that, and somebody else sat there, and it made a really nice amphitheater. I mean, that's exactly what it was. And then we had all this play thing that went on, and you had a May Day king and queen, and we got to do that. We did it every year, even after I started teaching, until the Russian thing came along, and they had May Day, so we didn't get to do that anymore.
That's interesting that particular political or international or geopolitical action caused that to come to an end now. And did you all actually have the pole and you did the dance?
Yes. Oh, yes.
Were you one of the dancers?
No, I was too little.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah, I didn't get to do that because those were saved for the big kids.
The bigger kids did that.
Mm-hmm. And we went to the 9th grade.
Okay, yeah.
So the bigger kids did.
And apparently Halloween carnivals were a big deal.
Oh my goodness, yes, so fun, so fun. And they were in different places too. But they were at the school, in the classrooms. That wasn't a mess. And then they had them on the playground, they had them at the community center. But Halloween was always a big deal. And you would go to the carnival and play all the games and have such a wonderful time, and then you got to go trick-or-treating. And my mother always went with us. But as we got older, it was easier not to take her with us. But we never got in real bad trouble.
Okay. We won't record it if you did. How's that?
No, it wasn't ever really bad.
You know, one of the things I always like to find out about from our friends from Davenport, the beautiful WPA-built pool. What are your memories of going to that pool?
Oh my goodness. I do not like to talk about that because it's not there anymore.
That's sad.
But
your memories are going to be great.
Oh yes. It was a big hole, a big pool, had no water in it. And you'd go by and you'd look down in there and you'd see what the things that people had thrown in, or trash, or palm limbs, or whatever. There was a drain, and it never had any water in it unless somebody stopped it up for a baptizing.
Interesting. So there were baptisms there. Okay.
And then the big boys would put alligators in there too.
Those boys.
Those boys. But eventually, I was probably in about the 5th grade when my dad and some of the other dads got together, built a hog wire fence. Do you know what that is? That's big square.
Describe it for us so everybody.
It's has big squares of wire, not particularly picturesque, for lack of a better word. Anyway, and a little frame bathhouse with a little concession stand. They painted it and put water in it, and it didn't have a system. We had to drain that pool every 3 weeks. Or
wow.
They would do the water testing, and they would put the chemicals in that needed to be put in. And at some point in about 3 weeks, you would have to let all the water go out into Lake Play, and somebody had to scrub that.
And who did that?
Anybody that got a chance to do it. If you were lucky, you got to got to be one that was picked to scrub that pool. Well, you wouldn't think that'd be a very good job, but you'd scrub, and we had some grown-ups that helped scrub too. They probably did more scrubbing than we did, but we would scrub it and rinse it out, and then they closed the drain and filled it up, and you got to go swimming in the pool while it was filling up.
Oh, how fun.
It was the most wonderful thing, and the water was so cold, I remember. But if you didn't help scrub, you didn't get to be in there. But as the water level came up, it was exciting.
Yeah.
I know, maybe not so much today, but in those days it was really exciting. And I was one of those lucky kids that got to do it a lot.
I think that'd be exciting today to get in cold, moving water and getting ready for the big swim. So did all the kids learn to swim at that pool? Is that where everybody jumped in and got their swimming lessons?
Well, we had a swim team, and as far as, I don't remember early on that we had much swim lessons.
Okay.
There was a man that came in and did swim lessons after 6 o'clock when the pool closed sometimes, but not as on a regular basis. And then later on, I got to do that when I went off to college, and I was on I wasn't on the swim team. I was on the synchronized swimming team.
Oh, nice. Tell me about that.
Well, it was just a thing that you did, when everybody swims together. And but anyway, it was fun. But I came back, and by that time, when I came home, I was married and had 2 children. But we started swimming lessons.
Great.
And anybody that came. My daughter, I was pregnant with her, and a friend called me and said, "Turn on the TV, turn on the TV." And I said, "Okay." And she said, "This is what we're going to do to your baby." And there was a little tiny baby in the water swimming. Well, I hadn't had mine yet, but I can remember taking her down when she was 5 weeks old, putting her in that pool and underneath the water. And one of my teachers, Miss Phipps, hanging on the fence on the outside saying, "How could you do that to that little bitty baby?" But she did fine. And she was on the swim team too.
Wonderful.
When we started a new one, and she was 3 years old.
Wow.
She did more grinning and waving than she did swimming, but she could make it from one end to the other.
Great. Right before we leave, your growing up time in Davenport, and we'll move on. I want to hear about your career and then your family, of course, your children. I remember reading in your interview information your memories about a party line. What was the party line?
Well, Franklin Bragg lived across the street from us, and when you had a telephone, you had a party line. There would be 3 or 4 people on that party line. Well, he was older than us, and he was he was a football player, and he had a girlfriend, and he would get on that party line, and he would stay on there forever, and you could never get on that phone. He used to sit and let his dad wrap his legs for the football game, and he'd talk to his girlfriend. But he also wasn't very nice. But I can't say that about him now because he's not with us anymore. But anyway, he used to play rough with the kids. We'd play football, touch football in the yard. Our yard was always full of kids. And he would come over. When he would come and play, it was always knock them down. We just played ragtag or touch.
Sure.
But we all played. My dad played with us.
So just one more question about that party line. Did you all listen to his conversations?
Of course we did. Of course we did.
Did he know?
He probably did. He probably did.
So I want to make sure that I get your school experience. So you started school in Ocoee, is that
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
And then when you moved to Davenport, Christmas, then you're going to start 2nd grade in Davenport.
Right.
So you went to school in Davenport from 2nd grade all the way through the point that you entered high school, and then you were in Haines
Through
City?
9th grade. And then we went to Haines City.
Okay. And then,
And I graduated from Haines City High School.
okay. Anything you want to, any experiences or memories you want to share about Haines City High School?
I don't know. It was sure a big school and had a lot of kids. I remember that.
Yeah. Big difference, probably a change coming from Davenport over to
Yeah.
Haines City.
Yeah.
And then you went to Florida State, graduated from Florida State.
Yes, I did.
How did you make that choice?
I don't think there was a choice. You know, when
This
you
is where
wanted
you're
to be
going.
a school teacher, you went to Florida State.
And you knew that was going to be your goal in life, is to teach.
I saw a movie in the 4th grade about the circus at Florida State.
Yeah.
That really impressed me, but that wasn't really the reason. But I sure do remember it.
Sure, yeah. So you graduated and you knew that you were going to go into teaching in the field of education. Where and when did you meet your husband? How?
I met him, his brother, and my roommate went together, and she introduced us, and he lived in Perry, and he would come up to see me, and anyway, we got married, and then we moved to Perry, and I drove back and forth for the last half a year of my, and then I taught at Perry Elementary. Or in fact, I finished out the year at a junior high, and then I moved to Perry Elementary and taught 1st grade. And the next year, they started a kindergarten program, and I started that program. And I knew I'd found my place. That was my spot. I love 5-year-olds, and they liked me too.
Well, they could feel that you loved them, so
it was wonderful.
that was.
And then I taught for 3 years, and then my dad decided that he wanted to retire, and he had a store in Davenport. It was it started out as a radio and TV repair. That was before you took your radios and your TVs to be repaired. You didn't throw them away. And that's what my dad did. And it grew from, my mother would answer the telephone, Conroy's Radio and TV. Then after that it was Conroy's Radio and TV, Furniture and Appliances.
Oh.
And sometime when I was in college, it was Conroy's Radio and TV, Furniture, Appliances, and LP Gas.
Wow.
Anyway, my dad decided that he thought he needed to retire. So he encouraged my husband to move. Freddie was a welder at the paper mill, but we picked up and moved to Davenport. And I taught school, and he worked at Conroy's, and everything else is history. He worked there for a little while, and then probably about 6 years later, we opened a feed store in Davenport.
That's Summerlin Fence?
Summerlin Fence and Feed. He put up fence, and he had to have a storefront because you couldn't just have, he did it from home for a while. And so then when he built the building, we sold feed, and it was like a garden center and plants and that sort of thing. And it's still there. And my middle son is the proprietor.
So let's talk about that. So you have 3 children. So let's talk about them, when they were born, their names. So,
okay, the oldest one is Bryn. He was born in Tallahassee, actually.
okay.
But we were living in Perry. He started, he was in kindergarten, and he came, when we moved to Davenport, he was in the middle. So I guess he didn't start kindergarten there, but he finished it up. He is the vice mayor of Davenport.
My goodness gracious, how perfect. This family that loves Davenport, and there he is.
And there he is. He's my politician son. He also is an auctioneer. He auctions at Ducks Unlimited and Turkey Federation and NRA and all that other stuff. All over the state, really.
Yeah.
He's got at least 1 or 2 a week.
Wow.
All the time.
Who came next? Who's
well,
next?
he also has a business.
Oh, wow.
He doesn't sell paint, but he takes care of all the, like the spray equipment and all the things that go with it, except for the paint.
Okay.
All right, son number 2 is the feed store. He takes care of he does all the feed stores stuff, and
That's Randy?
that's Randy.
Okay.
And they just bought a new one in Dundee.
Congratulations.
So now he has 2, I guess. I'm not sure.
He has a chain.
Yeah, you could say that. I'm not sure at the end of the day when he says, and why did we buy this feed store? But anyway, and then there's Samantha. And she, when I retired from teaching school, my mother, I have to go back and tell you, she was an entrepreneur. She was a true little businesswoman that didn't have any experience, but she was extremely smart. And she would she bought up all these little houses in Davenport, and she would rent them out. And she always told me, don't sell them. God's not making land anymore.
Wow.
Put a Band-Aid on it and rent it till you can do something better. And so that was her premise. Well, anyway, she bought it's the hotel in Davenport. It's the second oldest building in town.
That's how that got to be in the family. Yeah,
Yes.
tell us a little bit about that. The boarding house is a pretty
It was
significant.
a boarding house.
Yeah.
Yes, it was. And it had one bathroom. There was a bathroom outside. It wasn't an outhouse, but it was. It was a real, it wasn't an outhouse as dig a hole and that kind of thing. It was a flush toilet, but it had a bathroom outside and a shower room. But that's only one bathroom in the house.
Wow.
And it's 3 stories. And it wasn't in very good repair. And Freddie and I decided that I had started a little flower shop, and I needed something bigger because I was in a little tiny shop that my mother owned in Davenport's first strip mall that they built when I was in the 11th grade. And there was a little store that had been a barber shop, and that's where I had my flower shop. But we needed something bigger, so we took that house and redid it, and it was called the hotel back in 1911, but it really was a boarding house. And anyway, now Samantha runs it, and it is a flower shop. And well, it started out as a tea room and lunches and that sort of thing, but she got married, and they have a barbecue team.
Wow.
Yes. So now it's a barbecue joint too.
Well, and the thing that's interesting about it, as I recall, there's a history with the railroads. Didn't the people who worked for the railroad, didn't they stay at the boarding house? Am I correct about that?
I don't know if they did, but they could have. Mostly, I think it was just from what I've been told, it was like a long-term rental.
Okay.
Several of I have one friend that her parents lived there when they got married in one room.
Yeah.
Because she told a story about her daddy came home and came upstairs and looked at what her mother had cooked on that little pump-up kerosene stove, because it didn't have that's all they had. And he didn't like the looks of and he just reached over and threw it out the window. Her mother wasn't very happy either. But it was like a kind of a long-term boarding house sort of thing, and it's a possibility that it could have had people that stayed there on a temporary basis. But the railroad was right there. I mean, here's the hotel, and then 1792 is here, and the railroad is right there.
So I know it was, certainly strategically placed to accommodate rail travel. So that could very well have been some of the people that stayed there.
It's a good possibility. Yes.
And it's so great. Samantha, the family owns it, and Samantha is operating. Your children are very diverse. Each one has so many different businesses that they are operating and endeavors they're involved in.
They're all different. But it works for each one of them.
Mm-hmm. So before we move forward, I want to go back and ask about, I know your beloved Davenport and your career that you love so much teaching. Tell us a couple memories you have from your teaching career. Again, tell me how many years you were in
31.
School? 31 years at the Davenport School,
Mm-hmm.
which is this beautiful building that's just been recently restored and is operating today.
Yes.
Can you share a couple of school teacher memories with us?
I have so many.
I know.
It was, I think, one of the best things that I could do. We had kindergarten all day, and gradually, it went from more play, to less play and more learn. Mm-hmm. But we learned from everything. And I loved it when I could say, okay, if you really work hard this morning, we'll take a walk after lunch. And we would walk down to the lake, which is right there, and walk around the lake and count the flowers and count the ducks and the birds and see what we could find.
Oh,
and
my.
Just be kids.
Mm-hmm.
But we were learning at the same time. And then one day I started to walk up to take them around the lake, and you had to have 2 weeks notice that you let the county know, so you couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
That was a disappointment. But I love it when my children see me in Walmart or see me in the grocery store and they say, "Hey, Mrs. Summerlin, do you remember me?" And my classic answer is, "I would if you were 5. Now, what is your name?"
That is a great answer.
Well, it works for me because they change so much, more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
They remember me, and now they have now I have grandchildren because they have children, and I love that part.
Exactly.
I love that part. But we went on lots of field trips, and we had lots of things. You were talking about the Halloween carnival. Mm-hmm. We had a mini carnival in kindergarten where they had tickets, and they had to match the color of the tickets with the color of the booth, and they could do it. And
sweet.
It was just a learning tool. Mm-hmm. They didn't know they were learning, but they were.
Indeed.
And so, that's what I liked more than anything, is that you could take something, you could cook something, you could bake a cake in the classroom, and you had to measure and you had to count. You had to count the eggs that you put in, and you had to measure. It was a great learning experience. Mm-hmm. And they didn't even know they were learning.
They thought they were playing.
They thought they were playing, and that was my end goal, was to make learning as fun as it could be, so that they didn't ever know that that's what they were doing.
Well, it's clear you have a teacher's heart. That's very obvious.
Well, it's wonderful to see my kids.
Uh-huh. Well, and if I'm correct, let's see. So you went to school there. Your children went to school there. Your grandchildren go to school there.
Some of them did. All of them didn't.
Some of your grandchildren went to school there. Your children are still involved in endeavors in and around Davenport.
Everybody's still right here. Uh-huh. Randy has moved to Winter Haven, but he's the only one. Everybody else is.
Well, and then other life, there's your career and raising family, and your young life there. What about civic involvement, churches? What are your memories of things that you all did in clubs or civic organizations or churches in Davenport? I know you, I remember reading in your notes your involvement in the youth fair. I think both you and your husband.
Oh, yeah. All right, I married this Georgia boy.
Good.
Yeah, and his daddy was a sharecropper. So they lived on farms and they did all this stuff. Well, when he started the feed store, that's when he got Bryn involved in youth fair. Bryn was 12, and he had his first steer, and that was the start. And then later on, Freddie he was president of the youth fair, and I am on the board and have been for, I don't know, a bunch of years, many.
Beautiful.
And I haven't missed a youth fair since Bryn was 12.
Wow, what an achievement. That's amazing.
Yeah, well,
and you also serve as a 4-H leader? You were...
Oh yeah, we did 4-H, Cub Scouts, of course. I didn't know, I didn't have the concept that you send your kids anywhere, you take them.
You take them.
If they're doing something, you're doing it with them.
Yeah.
I had a friend one time when I was getting ready to go to camp, 4-H camp as a matter of fact, and she said, "Don't you know you're supposed to send your kids to camp? You're not supposed to take them?" And I said, "Well,
I didn't learn that lesson."
I didn't learn that lesson, no.
That's really great. Well, and there's one more thing. You were also the swim team coach.
Oh yeah.
So,
oh yeah.
And I guess that starts with throwing Samantha in the pool when she was just born.
Yes.
That started early.
Yes, and poor Miss Phipps saying, "How could you do that to little bitty baby?" She was mad at me. She didn't talk to me for weeks.
Oh, how funny. That is really funny. That is the other side of living in a small community, is that everybody has an opinion about everything
That's
you're doing.
exactly right.
But that's mostly great. That's mostly good. So there's one question I want to ask you before we close, and then you tell me what you want me to know. Summerlin is a pretty interesting name in these parts of the woods. Is your Summerlin family related to Jacob Summerlin, cattle baron Jacob Summerlin?
We think so.
Interesting.
I have never researched it, but I know that there were two brothers, and one stayed in Georgia or North Carolina or South Carolina, and the other one came here. And
could very well be.
Yes.
Well, that's a great research project we'll have to get you involved in over at the History Center sometime. We'll have to do a little research on that subject. I want to say thank you. I love hearing your stories. The memories are wonderful. They make me very happy. I'm going to dig through one more little memory because I happen to know another pioneer from Davenport, Harriet Rust, who I understand was a playmate. Harriet and her friend Charlotte. Sisters. And you all were playmates.
Oh yes.
And you played cowboys and Indians,
or
cops and robbers or something.
Cowboys and Indians. You know, we went to the movie in downtown Haines City, if you could get your mom to take you. Sometimes you could, sometimes you couldn't. So you got to go once in a while, and you'd see these movies, cowboy movies, you know, and the sheriff went out in the Badlands to get the bad guy, and they'd shoot him and roll him up in a tarp and throw him over the horse. Well, we were playing cowboys and Indians and cowboys and bad men, and I was the bad man that day. And so I got shot and rolled up in a sheet, and they went off and left me in the front yard. I couldn't get out of that sheet. I don't like being in tight places any at all today. And I blame it on Harriet and Charlotte Rust, but they weren't the only ones. Harriet Rust, and I'm not sure what Charlotte's last name is. It's her sister. They were Ruiz at the time.
Right.
Harriet and Charlotte Ruiz, and all the other kids in the neighborhood.
How did you get out of that sheet?
They finally came back and let me out, but I was not happy.
Just fun memories growing up in Davenport.
Yeah, we skated and we flew kites, and there were just lots of us. It was after the war, and I guess everybody was ready for having babies or had had them, or I don't know, but there were bunches in every house. There was a kid.
Lots of kids, yeah.
And lots of kids, and we all played together, and you know, I told you about the skates, and we just all did everything together. It was just so fun.
I know it is, and I just wonder, I want to make sure we didn't miss anything. Is there a memory that you want to share with us that I didn't ask?
I don't know, there's so many. Fun times is all I can tell you. It's in a time, we grew up in a time where there was less stress. You sat around together with your family. The kids went out to play. You didn't have to say, I'm going so-and-so. They just turned you loose. You did your chores and then you went to play just so you were home at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And my dad didn't like television, so when televisions came in, you better not be over at the neighbors watching that infernal machine. You better not. So I never got to see Howdy Doody sing the goodbye song.
Oh.
But then we did end up with a TV when he needed to learn how to fix it.
That is a great story. You're right, because then you have a repair shop.
Yeah.
And you wind up, he's repairing a TV,
but
he didn't like that.
No. But you know, funny that he didn't like TV, but he loved going to the movies.
Interesting.
We went to the movies, to the drive-in movies.
Fun. Where did you go to the drive-in movie?
Haines City.
Haines City, okay. As a family, everybody got in the car and you went to the drive-in. Nice.
And you packed your supper. My mother packed supper, and we ate supper watching the movie.
How wonderful was that?
That was my dad was a movie buff, but he didn't like TV.
Interesting. Jackie, thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to come in and talk with you and share your story, your life story of life in Davenport. And we appreciate so much having you with us. Anything else you want to share with us?
Well, the only thing I can think of is that thank Davenport for being such a great place to grow up. And the children that I had at school made everything worthwhile. And the children I grew up with that are my friends today, it was a wonderful, wonderful place to grow up. And I just hope that there are a lot more little towns like Davenport that make it so wonderful for other kids like all of us that grew up in Davenport.
Thank you so much for that sentiment. It's the importance of community, right?
It is.
It's community.
It is.
In Davenport. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today as we had the opportunity to learn about Jackie Conroy Summerlin's life growing up and being a strong family over in the Davenport area. Thank you also for your involvement in preserving Polk County history.